data types and data structures. There's two basic data types, numbers and sequences. Numbers are things like integers, floating point decimals, and complex numbers. Um, Sequences are things like strings and lists. First off, we'll start by declaring the variable I as an integer. And, in order to check that I is an integer, we use the type function. And when I press type, you'll notice a little window pops up, and it tells you how to use the function and what it should return. And it should return the object's type. So I'll put I in here, and we'll check that it is an integer, and it is an integer. You also notice that the function got color coded to reddish pink color. Something to note. And also the color coding continues when I type in a string. Since I use the quotes, the string will turn green. And a string is a sequence. But let's check that it is, in fact, the correct thing. We wanted it to be a string, and it is a string. We'll declare z as a complex number, and also it's important that the 2 comes before the j in the complex number, or it won't recognize it as complex. It'll think that it's a variable that you're trying to use, and it'll, in this case, since we haven't declared j as a variable, it'll give us an error. So let's see if it is declared properly. That was z. Yeah, complex. And then lastly, we'll declare a, which is a list of integers. And we'll say type. Type of object A is a list. Okay, let's take a look a little bit closer at numbers. Again, the different types of numbers are integers, floating point decimals, and complex numbers. So something handy to know is the int function. So if I put a random decimal in the int function, it's going to return an integer. So basically it cuts off the decimal. And you'll notice here that it didn't round up. It just cuts it off. So something to think about. There's another function to round, but we won't get into that now. You can also, let's see, declare a number in a string, and the int function will convert it from a string. So let's just type s is a string, and then if you use the int function s, you'll notice that it's not green, it's blue. It's not a string in this case. It converted it from a string to an integer. So similarly, a floating point decimal can be converted, and if we just say f is equal to 23 point some decimal, and we want it to be a string, so we'll put some quotes around it, and the type is, we'll just check the type, that it is in fact f is a string. And if we use the float function, which the float function turns it into a floating point decimal. So again, just to show you that the float function doesn't actually change the variable. It's still a string, just the return from this function is an integer that pulls this number out of the string, turns it into an integer. So if you wanted to change, you could say f equals float f, and then let's check that. Yeah, so if you wanted to change it, then you have to redeclare the variable as the return of that function f, and it'll turn it into a float. So next we'll get into complex numbers, and in order to get into complex numbers, we just like we had to import the math library, we need to import the complex math, which is named CMath, to do complex math. So first off, we will declare the variable x as 1 plus 3j, and we'll check that. We declared it properly, and we did. It's complex. So we can do the absolute value function, which gives the absolute value of this complex number. Let's see, x dot imag will give us the imaginary portion is the 3 here, and x dot real will give us the real part, which is the 1, and let's see, we can multiply. We can multiply by a real number. We can also square root. CMath dot sqrt x, and that will give us the square root, which is pretty cool that it does it so fast. So let's just check the functions that are in. We did this with the math. We'll just check CMath and see what's going on in there. And it'll give us a list of functions that are built into the CMath library. And so you can do a lot of pretty complex math with complex numbers in Python, just with the built-in CMath library that comes with Python already. So pretty cool function and set of functions in the CMath library. Next we'll talk some more about data types and specifically sequences.